terrified. But Jesus came and touched them and said, "Get up." He said, "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. So today we celebrate when Jesus Christ took 3 of the disciples into the mountain of Tabor, which is written in Psalm 89, verse 12. When we celebrate the transfiguration of our Lord Jesus Christ in that mountain, we remember that Christ's light still works upon us today. That's why we're gathered here together. Most of us here don't know each other. Most of us has not even spoken to each other. But what unites us here today together is the Spirit of Jesus Christ. It is the Spirit of that light that was shining from that Tabor, from that mountain. So I want everyone to think about this day, to think about St. Peter, James, and John that saw the shining of Jesus Christ, divine power in that mountain, and they felt that they wanted to live there in that mountain forever. St. Peter said, "It is good for us to live here forever. Let us make shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and let us live here forever. I do not want to go back to that world." So let's unite together with that spirit of Peter, saying that we do not want to live a life without Jesus Christ. So with that powerful message, what we're going to go through today is a little brief history of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. First, we're going to talk a little bit about why we are called the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and what does that mean. Before starting with Ethiopian, why we say Ethiopian, I'm going to start with Orthodox and Tewahedo. Orthodox is a Greek-driven word. We are all recognize the name Orthodox, and it's a Greek word driven, ortho meaning straight, and dox, religion. This name was founded in 325 AD. Yesterday we mentioned it in the Amharic preaching, when Arius, a bishop from Libya, started to heresize, started to preach the wrong side of Christianity, saying that Jesus Christ is not Lord, but Jesus Christ was just created. Because of that heresy, 318 scholars of the church around the world came together in one council, in the council called Nicaea or Nicaea. And together they prayed. They tried to fix Arius' heresy, but he wouldn't get back to that church. He wouldn't believe that Jesus Christ was Lord. So he was excommunicated. After they excommunicated him, they wrote a religious creed. They wrote a creed of what our faith is. They wrote a creed of what Jesus Christ preached. They wrote a creed of what the apostles passed to them. And said, "We are Orthodox. We will not follow Arius' false preaching, heresy. But we will continue preaching that Jesus is Lord. Just like Peter said, you are the Son of God, Jesus Christ. For that matter, we are Christians that follow the Orthodox way of the preaching of Jesus Christ." So that's when the name Orthodox was given. Tewahedo is a Giz word. Giz is a language, the first ancient language of the world and of Ethiopia. It is one of the 5 ancient languages in the world. Giz is only used in the churches today, just like Latin is used in the Catholic Church. But in the previous years, Giz was the main language of Ethiopia. Tewahedo is a Giz language, and it means unity. It means, it preaches, or it teaches the teaching of incarnation. Incarnation is Tewahedo, or the teaching of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ is not of two nature. That Jesus Christ is not of two persons, but one nature. And that fallacy happened in 431 AD of a bishop, archbishop actually, or patriarch actually, and his name is Nestorian, or Nistros, as we call him. And he started preaching that Jesus Christ had two nature, and Jesus Christ had two persons. We're not going to go deeply into that dogma right now because we're only going through brief history, and we don't want to go in depth, but because of that heresy, again, 200 of the apostles and scholars of the church gathered together, and they excommunicated Nestorian. They told him that it's a heresy, and that he should get back to the teachings of the apostles, teachings of the Bible. He wouldn't listen. He was excommunicated. But when he was excommunicated, they gave us the name, tewahedo. We have the voice of tewahedo. We have the voice of incarnation. We have the voice of Jesus Christ being one nature. That's when we received the name tewahedo. The reason we're called Ethiopian Orthodox tewahedo is not because only Ethiopians should believe in this, or only Ethiopians are the Christians, or only the Ethiopians are Orthodox. But it's just to signify that our canon might be different from other sister churches. I'm going to ask a question to the youth group because one of the classes we talked about this. And if you guys remember, I told you about the 5 sisters, the 5 Oriental Orthodox churches and their names. Can you tell me one, Martha? India. Can you tell me one? Somebody, just raise your hands and tell me. India. Huh? Egypt. So we said India, Egypt,
Greece, Armenia,
no.
Syria.
Armenia, Syria. One more.
Ethiopia.
Of course, Ethiopia.
And then another one.
These 5 are called the Oriental Orthodox churches that pass through all these obstacles of the church, and when everyone else, Catholicism, Protestants, Lutheranism, everybody went their own path, stayed in that apostolic teaching that Jesus Christ is Lord. Jesus Christ has one nature, and he was born from the Virgin Mary. We are called the Orthodox Tewahedo Church. The reason we're called Ethiopians is to signify us that the five sister churches that we just mentioned, for example, we have in West St. Paul, we have Egypt, a Coptic Orthodox church. We could go to them. We could have intermarriage. We could be part of their Holy Eucharist, or be part of their precious blood and taking the blood and flesh of Jesus Christ. We could partake of their Mass. We are one in spirit. We count their baptism, they count our baptism. But the only differences might be in culture, tradition, and canon. We might have a different way of praying. We might have a different way of fasting. We might have a different way of preaching. Because of that significance, we are called the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. How did the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church became to be? How did we become Christians? The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church history starts from the Bible. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church history starts from the Bible. Acts chapter 8, verse 26. Here's something that we could read when you go home. Acts chapter 8, verse 26. The beginning of Ethiopian Christianity. The Ethiopian eunuch, who was an important official and in charge of all the treasury of Candace, the queen of Ethiopia, came to Jerusalem for worship and found St. Philip. He was reading from the book of Isaiah the prophet. Because the eunuch asked for translations of Isaiah, St. Philip preached the good news to him and baptized him. On that significant day, when that high official, went to Jerusalem to worship, because he did that every year, Ethiopians had faith before Christianity in God. They knew that Jesus Christ was coming. They knew of the Old Testament. They knew of Moses. They knew of Abraham. They knew of Isaac. They knew of Jacob. They knew who their fathers are. They knew who their Lord is, or God is. And they were waiting for that prophecy to be made, and that's Jesus Christ being born, or that Messiah coming. And he was reading, that Enoch or that high official was reading while going to Jerusalem about Jesus Christ coming. And he didn't understand. Because of that, Philip went and baptized him. That high official became the first known Christian of the Ethiopian land. When that high official, or Enoch, or as we say, Jandarema, went to Ethiopia and preached the gospel of Jesus Christ. No apostle ever came to Ethiopia to preach. There are some scholars that would say, yeah, St. Matthew had come, or maybe Andreas, or the others would say others. But we believe that no apostles ever showed. We have no history connection that any of the apostles came to preach, but it was with this significant man that was blessed to be baptized and bring Christianity to Ethiopia. When he brought Christianity to Ethiopia, he preached it around the Queen's kingdom, to the people. Everybody started to know about Christianity. It wasn't hard for Ethiopians to accept Christianity because they talked about it for all the times of their history. Their forefathers told them that a Messiah will come. That we do not worship idols. We worship the God of Abraham. We worship the God of Isaac. We worship the God of Jacob. And someday, all the prophecies will be fulfilled. And that the Messiah will come. They knew of all these stories. Just like we tell our kids stories and they grew up with it. Ethiopians grew with that story. Ethiopians grew with that story. So it was easy for them to accept the gospel. The only problem was, even though that Enoch or Jandarua went to Ethiopia and preached, there was not an official priests, churches, or service of mass, and Christianity did not become a national religion for 330 years. That didn't happen. Why? History knows. It was not until this great man called Saint Fremantos, Abba Kasate Berhan, as we call him in Ethiopia. He was the first apostle to come to Ethiopia and preach. He's not from the 12 disciples, of course, because it's after 300 years. And we'll read a little bit about his story. Even though the Ethiopian Enoch went to Ethiopia and preached the gospel around the Queen's place and to the people, it was not until the great apostle Saint Frumentius that Christianity built its structure in Ethiopia, 330 AD. Ethiopia met a great era of history when the king of Aksumite was King Ezana, along with his brother Saizana. Before Abuna Salama Kasate Ibran, Christianity was only known by heart, like I said. Ethiopia didn't have priests or Holy Communion services. But because of this man, everything was made possible. He was sent by the Coptics. He was sent by Athanasius. Have we ever heard of the name Saint Athanasius? Or the 20th Patriarch of Egypt? He was a holy man that was an important figure when they excommunicated Arius in 325 AD. Saint Athanasius, as we say it, Athanasius. He was the one that anointed Saint Frumentius, Abba Kasate Ibrahim, and sent him to us. Saint Frumentius is not in Ethiopia. He's from the west. He came to Ethiopia before he was anointed. He learned Giz. He learned the traditions of Ethiopia, ate the food, became part of it, assimilated to our culture, went back to Egypt, became a bishop, and became an apostle. And because of this great holy man, we are who we are today. The next very important era of the church was the era of the 9 monks, or 9 saints. And I just want to say that we are blessed to have a monk in our church. And if you get, sometimes visual presentation, what we have in our church could be more than the presentations we have here. What a monk looks like is our father right here, Abba Haidamike. Traditionally, or what a monk looks like in Ethiopia is right here. The way they dress, their attires, the crosses they hold, this is what a monk looks like. And he's our administrator, our father, our spiritual father, that we are blessed, right? Are we blessed to have him?
Yep.
We are. So these 9 monks, or these 9 saints, had a big, significant history in the church. All the 9 monks came from the west. Imagine this one. Saint Fermentus was from the west. He was not an Ethiopian. These, all 9 of them, were not Ethiopians either. We're not Ethiopians either. All the 9 monks came from the west, Byzantine Empire, exiled because they wouldn't accept the Council of Chalcedon, which teaches monophysitism, which is what we talked about earlier, 2 natures. Monophysitism, which divided the nature of Christ in 2. These spiritual monks became the blossom and golden era of Ethiopia at the time. The Aksum royal court had converted to Christianity over a century earlier, but much of the country outside of Aksum had yet to hear about the gospel. The 9 saints established missionaries in areas outside of Aksum. Aksum is like the government official name of Ethiopia at the time. Ethiopia was called the Aksumite kingdom. The 9 saints established missionaries in areas outside of Aksum. They built churches, translated the Bible from Greek to Ge'ez, and created Christian centers in various places. The 9 saints also translated a number of basic religion works in Ge'ez. These are the both doctrinal and literary content. Under the title of Kerlos, or Cyril, were translated dogmatically treaties and homilies of the church fathers. On this book, which was translated from the Greek text, is based on the teachings of the Ethiopian church. Other works translated at this period included the ascetic rules of Pachamis. Pachamis was a great monk. He was the 3rd generation after the first Makas. Pachamis, which still today regulate the monastic life of Ethiopia, and the life of Saint Anthony by the Athanasian, which is still widely read in Ethiopian church circles. I'm sorry, not Makas, but Anthony was the first monk. So they translated all these spiritual books, not only the Bible. They translated many of these books in Ge'ez. And they weren't born with Ge'ez. They came with a pact, just like we talked yesterday. What was our sermon yesterday? Passion, right? Yeah. Spiritual passion. They had that spiritual passion, that Jesus Christ should enter into everyone's heart. They came to Ethiopia, became Ethiopians in spirit. Forgot about all their traditions, all their families. Not because they wanted to be Ethiopians, but because they wanted Ethiopians to be Christians. So they translated everything from their own languages into Ge'ez by learning Ge'ez. And these are the 9 saints, and the blessings, may their blessings be with us. And we have monasteries in Ethiopia within everybody's name, with their own significant name. And one of the most important and ancient and very popular pilgrimage to visit is Deberesalem, which is one of the ancient ones in Ethiopia. And that was by, it's the monastery of Abuna Aragawi, who was the oldest one. Aragawi means the oldest. And he was the oldest of the monks that came. Next one we're going to look at now, what I want to say is, when we go through all these, this does not mean these are the only saints or these are only the significant people that passed in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church history. These are just basic ones for us to at least have their blessings today and at least know our history. The next one we're going to look at, we looked at Fermentus, a monk, and we looked at priests, all the 9 monks. Now we're going to look at a king, a political figure. A political figure that was a spiritual man. Our kingdom, or kings and leaders in the past, were spiritual. They actually some of them had priesthood in them. And one of them was King Caleb in the 6th century. King Caleb is recognized in the church history as a holy man for defending his Christian brothers in Yemen. Yemen was part of Ethiopia, Naga. Procopius John of Ephesus and other contemporary historians recount Caleb's invasion of Yemen around 520 against the Jewish Hamorite king Yusuf Asad Yatha. Is it Yatha? Can't read that. Also known as Duanuas. He eventually left his kingdom to live a monasteric life in Panteleon Gada monastery, leaving behind his throne. Actually, Panteleon is one of the 9 saints, and it's one of the monasteries that he built. Leaving leaving behind his throne and treasure for the love of Christ. Isn't that amazing? A king that left his throne to become a monk. After finishing his mission of defending Christians. Next significant figure that we're going to look at is Saint Yared. Born around 505 AD, Saint Yared added spiritual flavor to the already growing and spiritual wealth church. The coming of the 9 saints inaugurated a new era in the liturgical life of the Ethiopian church and in cultural development in general. Music and art flourished. So this significant saint is a figure of the he is the one that brought all the music that we are using today. Music and art flourished. To Yared, an Aksumite scholar of the time, is attributed the creation of Ethiopian church music. He was a disciple of the 9 saints, probably of Aragawi, which is the oldest of the fathers, and composed music in 3 modes. Giz, is, Ararai. These 3 modes are what we use. Just like Mozart uses its own modes, Saint Yared's modes are Giz, is, Ararai. For the blessing of it, let's hear what Giz looks, sounds like. Banta bezaita wa fasaita wa sabbaita ba kullu aburata wa qadista wa nzaita This is Giz. Is. I'm sorry. That's is Ararai. This Ararai is used only in Passion, mostly used in the Passion Week. And as you can see, it's a little tough. I've only learned of it only like less than 3 years, and I kind of had a little trouble in the Is, as you can see. Which is, so Saint Yared's modes are Giz, is, Ararai, which is still used in the Ethiopian church. The hymnary attributed to him is rich in inspiration and expression. Perhaps it is one of the best of its kind in Orient. So we just zipped through 300 years of Ethiopian history, Ethiopian Orthodox tewahedo history. These 300 years that I just spoke about in like 15 minutes is the golden age era of the Ethiopian church. The 4th, the 5th, and 6th century is known to be the golden age of the church. Many saints emerged, many books were written or translated. The spirit of the believers were at the glowing high stage. Almost every Ethiopian Christian knew its church doctrine and followed it with passion. Every believer had a spiritual leading father that teaches them repentance and the kingdom of God. Every believer knew very well about the Holy Communion and its importance and has made it their everyday lifestyle to partake from the Holy Eucharist. Yesterday in our sermon when we said passion, this is the kind of passion that we need to bring back to this church. Yeah. This is the era that we need today. This is the era that the youth group should work to have. At least the blessing of it. Love, faith. That's what it was together, not just faith. It looks like many of us today have faith and no love. That's why we have all these controversies and obstacles, and we'll look at it as we go. But this is the era that we need back. Every believer knew very well about the Holy Communion, not just the youngs. Holy Communion, what is Holy Communion? Korban. And its importance, and has made it their everyday lifestyle to partake from the Holy Eucharist. Holy Eucharist is a different word for Korban, or the precious blood and blessing flesh of Jesus Christ. This was all made possible because God was with the Ethiopian people and gave us apostles like Aferam and the 9 saints, kings like Azana and Saizana, King Caleb, and many more. After 300 years of golden age, we had 300 years of weakness. Not dark age, but weakness. After that, 300 years of weakness after the golden age. Around the end of 6th century, Muhammad, leader of the Muslim world, merged and converted many of the Arab world to Islam. Yemen, who was under Ethiopian territory, was taken away by Fars. Fars is Iran today. Was taken away by Iran. Many of that reason converted to Islam, weakening Christianity in Yemen. Its churches and books were burned and replaced by mosques and Qurans. Today, Yemen is almost all Muslim. Even though Muhammad said, never touch the Habesha people. What is Habesha? It's our different name for Ethiopians. Habesha means mixed with different, Ethiopians have mixed of Jewish descent and descent of same too. Ethiopian priests would travel the long miles to Egypt, holding with them dozens of golden gifts to Alexandria in order for the Patriarch of Alexandria meaning the Coptics, to send a bishop for Ethiopia. This weakened the church to a greater amount, because Ethiopians weren't allowed to have their own bishops. We could have our own deacons, priests, that's it. We didn't have bishops, and we had to travel a long way to Egypt to bring bishops, and that weakened the church in a great way, in a great amount. Following that weakness, we had that dark age. Because of that weakness, we had that dark age. That's how it is in our lives too. In our youth group, when we become weak to go to church, when we become weak to do spiritual things, to do spiritual deeds, to read the Bible, that's when dark things started to happen in our lives. That's when we started having those obstacles of losing ourselves in the world. Following the weakness because of surrounding obstacles, the church entered a horrific dark age when a Jewish woman by the name of Yodit overthrew the freshly crowned young king, King Aferam. For 40 years, she burned down ancient churches, obelisks, and treasures of the church. The first Ethiopian church built by King Azan and Saizana, St. Mary Church, was burned down. Many important books of the church scholars were burned and lost to never be found again. Many priests and Christians' blood was shed because they stood against her. During this time, fathers of the church hid the Ark of Covenant from Aksum, taking it to a place called Zuai Island. I've seen that place. For 40 years, the Ark of Covenant was hidden there because of Yodit's burning in all the pain that she caused the church. But after 40 years of pain, God was still with the Ethiopian Christians. Amen. God was still with the Ethiopians. Second golden age. After all those obstacles and all those pains that we had for 40 years, destructions of Yodit Gudit, we were able to have a golden age. Again, like the ones in the 4th, 5th, and 6th century. 40 years of pain, 40 years of suffering and bloodshed, but the Lord that was with Joseph in prison was also with the Christians of Ethiopia during this dark age. Genesis 39:3. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church was able to rebuild its spirit. Most of the churches were rebuilt and most books were rewritten. Most of all, God blessed the nation with more greater apostles and saints. The rebuilding the spirit after the invasion didn't come without hardship and obstacle, but it was made possible because of hope, faith, and love. All three. Hope, faith, and love. Above all, Ethiopian Christians had great love. That's why they were able to have that golden age. They were able to return that spirit, that passion that fire that is within the heart, because they had love. They loved one another. They had passionate heart that ignited with the spiritual fire. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1. One of the saints that we are blessed to have again in the golden age is King Lalibela. Gabre Meskel Lalibela, also called Gabre Meskel, also called Lalibela, which means the bees recognized his sovereignty in old Agawa. That was his ethnic group. Lalibela is from Agawa, the ethnicity group of Agawa. Is the most famous and marveled of all the Zagwe kings resigned in Ethiopia. He is well known for building the 11 famous rock hewn churches. Whoever seen this place? Only Membi? This is a place to visit. This is a place to, that's all I can say, just visit. Yeah. He is well known for building the 11 famous rock hewn churches in his capital city, known as Roa. The 11 rock hewn churches, Beta Medanyalem, Beta Mariam, or House of Medanyalem, House of Mariam, House of Denagil, Beta Selassie, Beta Gologota, Beta Mikael, Beta Manuel, Beta Mercurius, Beta Abba Libanus, Beta Gabriel, Werufael, and Beta Georgis. These are the 11 churches that he built, structured by only rocks. And this is one of the 8th wonder of the world. The great apostle of Saint Abuna Taklaimanut was the next biggest apostle that God blessed Ethiopians. Again, the great apostle Saint Abuna Taklaimanut, from 1215 to 1314, lived in this world lived in Ethiopia for 99 years. Ethiopia was blessed to have him for 99 years of his life. God blessed Ethiopia with Saint Abuna Taklaimanut, who was a great apostolic monk that lived for 99 years. He was an Ethiopian monk who has founded a major monastery in his native province of Shoa, Deberesalem. Who's ever been in Deberesalem? Okay, that's a place to visit too. Abuna Taklaimanut preached the gospel of Christ around Ethiopia, getting rid of idols and putting back the words of God into hearts of so many lost Christians. Taklaimanut was born in Zorari, a district in Salali, which lies on the eastern edge of Shoa. He was the son of the priestess Tzagaza, gift of faith, and his wife Xiara, choice of God, who was also known as Sarah. Taklaimanut was born after his parents, who had failed to have children, pledged their firstborn to God. According to tradition, his ancestors had been Christians from Tigray, who had settled in Shoa 10 generations before. And that's Abuna Taklaimanut. During his youth, Shoa was a state that many of her Christian believers started to idolize, started to drive themselves away from spirituality, away from that spiritual passion, and started to worship idols. And that's when this significant saint came to be. During his youth, when he was youth, he started his apostolic life. During his youth, Shoa was subject to a number of devastating raids by Motalami, the pagan king of Damot, which lay beyond the Jama River. One of the Motalami's most notorious predations was with raid which led to the abduction of Xiara. She was reunited with Tzagaza through the intercession of Archangel Michael. These raids weakened the moral of the Christians in Shoa and straightened the practice of paganism. There are numbers of traditions, some of less historic values than others, which described Abuna Taklaimanut's interactions with Motalami. This is Deberesalem. Taklaimanut lived for 29 years after the foundation of this monastery. After 60 years of apostolic work around Ethiopia, mostly in south of Ethiopia and in Shoa and all around Ethiopia, his last 29 years of his life, he spent it in Deberesalem. He spent it away from people, just praying for Ethiopia. 22 years of his life with 2 feet, and 7 years of his life with 1 feet. After 2 years of straight standing, this is a miracle. This is something that happened to us in this age of generation is lack of faith. Because of all the technology and all the world pleasure that we have driven ourselves away from faith. We have driven ourselves that everything is possible in God. This man, this saint, prayed for 22 years of his life without, let alone sleep, without sitting. let alone eating without sleeping or sitting down. 22 years of his life, putting thrown in 4 ways of his body, only eating from trees that was around him in that place that he was, in that mountain that he was. Deberesalem, it is called. 22 years of his life he prayed. Of course, let alone 22 years, we can't stand for 24 hours, right? A person cannot go without sleep. So when he falls asleep, that throne hits him. He prayed for Ethiopia, not just Ethiopia, the world, for 22 years. After 22 years, his left leg, was it his left or right? I think it's left, right?
Right.
Is it right? His right leg was cut off. He kept going for 7 years with one leg. That's 29 years of his life. Takal Haymanot lived for 29 years after the foundation of the monastery, dying in the year before Emperor Widimarad did. This would date Takal Haymanot's death to 1314. He was first buried in a cave where he had originally lived as a hermit. Almost hermit is Bahatawi, right? Where he had originally lived as a hermit. Almost 60 years later, he was re-entered which is Filsata Azmu, is celebrated in Botasraulet, or May 12 in the Ethiopian calendar, at Debre Libanus. In the 1950s, Emperor Haile Selassie constructed a new church at Debre Libanus Monastery over the site of the Saint Tomb. It remains a place of pilgrimage, church education, and a favorite site to burial for many people across Ethiopia. Afterwards, after all those good golden age, we got another horrible dark age. Another dark age, Muhammad Gran, or the left. Muhammad Gran was a Somali imam and a general of Adad who invaded Ethiopia and defeated several Ethiopian emperors, wreaking much damage on that kingdom. His main focus became to burn churches and books, murder important church figures, and whoever he thought was a danger to his goal of spreading Islam in Ethiopia. Muhammad the Left was only successful for 15 years of damaging Ethiopia, but he left an unforgettable dark mark in the church. We were never able to have a golden age after this man, after Muhammad. That's something that should eat us today. We were never able to have a golden age again. All the obstacles and tests that we are facing today in our church, all the controversies and the split of the church, this is all driven from what Muhammad did for 15 years of his life, of invading Ethiopia. What he did is he just almost buried the spirit of the priests. Because for 15 years, if there is no apostle to preach, if there is no reading the Bible, if you're always being murdered for only being a Christian, things starts to fade away, right? 15 years that happened. Yodi did it for 40 years, but we were able to have golden ages. We were able to have Amun Takal Haymanot. We were able to have Nelalibela. But in this time age, there are saints, of course, but we did not have that luck, or that, no luck, but miracle or blessing to have that golden age again. Muhammad the Left was successful 15 years of damage in Ethiopia, but he left an unforgettable dark mark in the church. After Yodit Gudit, we were able to have golden ages. But after Muhammad invasion, the church spirit decreased in great amount. We started having deacons and priests who had no knowledge and care for the faith. Many converted to Islam. Era of warlords, or as we say it, Masafat. Zaman Masafat. For 86 years. That kind of hurt us too. Things started to go down after Muhammad. During this period, the church had another dark age. Because of these warlords that kept waging war against each other, it was easy for Muslim missionaries, Catholic missionaries, to come into the country and spread their heresy. Because of these wars and splits against each ethnic groups, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church was disconnected from the Alexandrian Church, or the Coptic Church. The church was unable to bring bishops from Alexandria because of the wars against each other. Many Christians converted to Islam due to lack of knowledge and priests to baptize them. That's what's happening today in Ethiopia. That's why we are called to have that passion again, to rise up with our knowledge, to rise up with our faith, to rise up by loving each other. The first anointing Ethiopian bishop. So after, even though Ethiopian accepted Christianity since 34 AD, just like we said previously, the church was not able to have its own bishop. All archbishops and bishops were sent from Alexandria. This had a great negative effect on the church for many years. This was made possible for the first time in the 16th century, during the reign of Zewditu. 5 bishops were anointed, and one of them was this great saint. So after that dark age, one of the saints that we, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, recognizes as Abuna Petros. Recently, just like 3 years ago, the church recognized Abuna Petros to being a saint in the church. The martyr during the invasion of Italy, this spiritual father stood by the side of the church and kept preaching the true gospel and inspired all to stay in perseverance and never give up hands to an enemy that destroys an innocent nation and try to eliminate the true one religion. Abuna Petros was shot 11 times. Petros means Peter. Abuna Petros was shot 11 times after excommunicating anyone that gave hands to an enemy that came to invade the land of God. 11 shots. And he became a martyr. And this is his real picture, it's not a drawing, this is his real picture. May the blessing of Abuna Petros be with all of us. Yeah. Current events. Now, I'm going to change into Amharic. ይህንን የምንነጋገረው በአማርኛ ልነጋገር የፈለኩበት ምክንያት